Welcome to our Summer at Your Library program, and thank you for tuning in for our cooking show. My name is Mina Abdullayan, the Adult Services Coordinator of Fresno County Public Library. I'm happy to say that we are hosting Miss Michele Falk, our Fresno food blogger, once again for our summer programs. She has created Have Fork Will Travel blog in 2018 for her love of food. She has decades of experience cooking and baking and is an accomplished competitive crafter and baker with multiple awards every year at the Big Fresno Fair. She is teaching us a couple of light summer meals for our Summer at Your Library program. As she always says in her programs, remember, life is too short for bad food. Enjoy the cooking show.
Hi, I'm Michelle, and I'm here from Have Fork Will Travel for the Fresno County Library Summer Sessions. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you like the recipes I have for you today. We're going to cover a few easy, simple meals or dishes that you can fix for the summer, because who wants to cook when it's 105 out? We should know, we just had ours. But we're going to cover a Tabouli salad, which is a bulgur wheat salad with lots of fresh veggies, a salami, cantaloupe, and mint salad. Then we're going to get a little creative and take some ground sausage and ground hamburger and turn it into two different dishes, some little sliders, and also I guess you'd call it a meatball on a stick. And then we're going to wrap it up with something sweet, because most people like to end the meal with something sweet, but this is a little different. We're going to do sweet corn muffins or sweet corn fritters. So if you like Fresno State corn, and who doesn't, you can use fresh corn in this. We'll cover that when we get to it, but I hope you have some in your freezer that you can dig out and use in the recipe. So we're going to get started with the Tabouli salad. With bulgur wheat, it takes about 15 to 20 minutes to soak, and so we'll get that started, and then we'll go and start on the salami and cantaloupe salad. So we have 1/3 cup of bulgur wheat, and then we have 1 cup of boiling water. And basically you're just going to mix it together and let it steep for about 15 to 20 minutes. So I'm going to move these out of the way real quick. Let this just sit here while we work on it. So we're also going to put in just a squirt of olive oil that will help it fluff up a little bit and keep the moisture in. We're going to cover it with saran wrap or plastic wrap, whatever you have handy. And again, this is just going to sit right here and do its thing. So we're going to get started on the salami and cantaloupe salad. First, you need to take 1/4 cup of olive oil, 2 tablespoons of white wine vinegar. If you don't have white wine vinegar handy, you can always use apple cider vinegar or plain white vinegar. You might want to add just a smidge, like maybe half a teaspoon of sugar into it if you use the regular vinegar, just to give it a little bit of sweetness. And you're going to mix it up a little bit, like that. We're going to toss some of the mint in. We're not using all of this, just enough to give it a little bit of flavor, and we'll put a little bit more in at the end. So we'll go like this. Real simple. Alright. And then we're going to add in the 4 ounces of sliced salami. I know it seems like it's a lot of salami, but it really isn't. And then we have about 2 cups of cantaloupe. Since I have a small bowl, what we're going to do is add in the chopped red onions first. And mix this up a little bit, and then I will fold in the cantaloupe. And always I have a bad habit of doing this, of getting too small a bowl or too small a pan, so make sure that you look at the size of the bowl before you start making the recipe. Alright, so it's coated in the vinaigrette, and it's a real simple vinaigrette. You can put in a little bit of salt and pepper at this point. We're going to do this. And again, this is one of those, if you want it a little more salty, you can. I would be careful because salami is very salty, but we're going to put just a couple pinches of each in. And we're going to add in most of the cantaloupe, again, because I grabbed too small of a bowl. And I would suggest making the cantaloupe about bite-sized. You don't want to get big chunks of it. If you're going to plate this like in spears, you could do that way. Just make sure that everything else is proportioned. So if you're doing like a cantaloupe, like a fan or balls, you could do that too. And again, it's very easy. So add a little bit more of the mint. Mint goes really well with a lot of fruit. It's a way of livening up a summer meal. So that way it's bright, it's fresh, and with the vinegar in there as well, it makes it just a little bit more spring-like. And when it's 105 out, you want something that's going to make it a little bit, to remind you of that it's cooler times. Alright, so got that pretty well mixed up. Real cooking, real kitchen, real messes. So, alright, so if you wanted to, you could use a little bit less salami, more cantaloupe. You could also add in probably honeydew as well. I wouldn't suggest watermelon, it's a different texture of a melon, but honeydew or any of the firmer melons would work really well with this. So let's put this here. I'm going to get a fork. I'm going to get a fork and take a taste. So the cantaloupe is really ripe. I'm going to add in actually the rest of this mint, or most of the rest of this mint. You want the flavors of the mint to balance out the sweetness of the melon, the saltiness of the salami, and with a little bit more tang from the vinegar. If you wanted to add a little bit more vinegar in, you could do so. You could also use a little bit of white balsamic for a little bit more fruity taste, but that doesn't have as much of a bite as, say, lemon or any of the other vinegars I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to put a little bit more salt in here because it needs actually just a little bit more salt and pepper. But I do know that my taste tester is going to be really happy when we have this later. And again, always get a big enough bowl. Alright, so this is about mixed up. And as you can see, it's nice and bright. But we're going to add one other thing to it. And we'll wait and we will add this on as we're plating. But you want to get it ready now. So what we have, let me put this out of the way here. So what we're going to do is we have the little bit of yogurt. We're also going to add in some more mint. Yes, more mint. A pinch of salt. Just a pinch though, because the yogurt is very tangy and it has a little bit of a sweetness just because it's yogurt. And then we're going to fold in the chopped pistachios. And I think I want to thin this out just a little bit. So I'm going to add in a dash of olive oil. It doesn't have to be extra virgin olive oil. It doesn't have to be fancy, just your basic olive oil. Again, we want simple, quick, easy to do, where you have good food that doesn't cost a lot of money. And as you can see, 2 tablespoons of pistachios goes a long way. So we have a nice topping to go with our salad right here. So I'm going to put these off to the side. That way the flavors can develop. We're going to give the tabouli just a little bit longer to steep. And we're going to get started on the next part, which is the meatball skewers, and also sliders. So now we have the salad in the fridge with all the flavors developing. We have the bulgur that's still steeping, and now we're going to get started on the sausage and kale sliders and the meatball skewers. So we have 1 pound of ground beef and 1 pound of sausage. We have a 1/4 teaspoon of red pepper flakes. That's optional. You can add more if you like it spicy, or omit them if you don't like spicy food. So we're going to add that in. We have about a heaping teaspoon of garlic. Again, that's one of those items that you can add in more or less depending on your preference. I like a lot of garlic. And again, we're taking this recipe and splitting it in two. We have 1 teaspoon of coriander, 1 teaspoon of cumin, and cumin also is one of those, it's a very strong spice, so use a little bit less if you don't like the earthy flavor as much. But I would use at least 1/2 teaspoon, that way you get the balance of the flavors, especially when we split it. We have about a teaspoon to teaspoon and a half. We're going to go with a teaspoon of Italian seasoning. If you don't have that handy, you can use basil or oregano and add that in. I would do about a 1/2 teaspoon of each. And then just to add a little bit more, and we're going to put in a little bit of salt and pepper, so about 1/2 teaspoon of pepper and generous amount of salt. It's going to work well with the meat when we split it. And then we have a 1/4 cup of olive oil. Pretty much all the recipes today, other than the dessert, will have olive oil in them. It's very healthy for you. And so we have just a pile right now. I'm going to mix it up, and then we'll make our skewers. Now if you see this jar, we have the skewers you can buy at any grocery store. They've been soaking in water. They're not all the way to the top with the water because we're going to break the skewers once we get the meat on there. If you're doing this in a regular pan, you don't, and especially if it's gas, you don't want bamboo skewers hanging off of the edge. They can they pose a fire danger at that. So if you're using a regular grill pan or even just a pan on the stove, you're going to want to break them off so they're even with the edge of the pan. So I'm going to mix this up real quick, and then we'll split it in two. And it just goes really quickly. You don't want to overmix it, but you do want to make sure that the sausage and the hamburger are well mixed together. You don't want one, you want an even balance. You don't want mostly ground beef or mostly sausage. The idea for this is to make it a balanced dish. And this can be either served as a side or take it to a picnic. You can even prep these ahead of time and take them to a picnic, basically chill them, and then grill them at the event. Alright, so this is about pretty well mixed up because you can see there are little flecks of pepper and the seasonings. So I'm going to split this in two, and then we will get started with the meat skewers. And you could do this as a meatball on the side if you want. I prefer actually making more of a log shape because that way you can brown the sides evenly. If you do meatballs on the skewer and you do them in a pan, it's not going to brown evenly, so the meat's not going to cook as thoroughly in the middle. And because it does have pork in it, especially, you want to make sure that everything is cooked all the way through. So that's about half and half. I'll put a little bit more there. We want nice juicy sliders. So I'm going to pull out, let's pull out that many. We may not use all of them, but we might. So they're saturated. They've been soaking for about an hour, up to about 3/4 of the way down. And you're going to want to take the meat and split it into, pretty even bits. So probably about the size of, not quite a baseball, but larger than a golf ball, about a palmful size. And you're going to want to roll it into a log shape. And if you have kids, you can have them help. Make sure that their hands are clean and they wash them really good afterwards. But it's kind of fun to play with your food. So we have basically one long meatball. And we're going to put a skewer through it very carefully. And make sure you reshape it around the skewer because it will shrink a little bit in the middle as the fat cooks out and will get a little slippery, but you want an even shape so when you turn it you can roll them on the grill so that way everything browns at an even rate. And these will cook pretty quickly too, as you'll see. So we'll get these together real quick. Let me do one more and then we'll pause it while I finish them up and they'll go on to the meatballs. So let me get this one up. And again, it goes really quickly. You could prep these the night before even. And I would say leave probably 2 inches. That way it's a nice portion size as well. If it's an adult, you could give them 2 or 3 of the skewers. If it's a child, you could give them, 1 and then go from there because we will have the salads after that and the corn fritters. So let me finish the rest of these up and then we'll start on the sliders. So I have the rest of the meat off to the side. We're going to do the sliders after this. We have a small indoor grill that I've heated up and we're going to cook the meatball skewers inside. We'll set them off on the side when they're done, do the sliders, and then we'll be ready to move on to finishing the tabbouleh salad. So basically you're going to want to heat your grill up so it's nice and hot. Always make sure it's clean before you get started. We're going to just hit it with a little bit of olive oil and brush it. And it's mostly just to keep the meat from sticking, though with the pork in there, it's going to have enough of a high fat content to be able to cook without sticking. But again, we want to make sure that these stay together so that way everything comes out the way it's supposed to. Now, I was able to get 5 skewers, and I'm just leaving these as is for now because you're going to want to be able to roll them back and forth just a little bit. And if you have to reshape them on the grill, that's fine. They cook pretty quickly. But the thing is, you want to make sure that they're cooked all the way through and cook evenly. And at this stage, they're pretty easy to form a little bit as they go. As you can see, I'm just kind of rolling them. We want to get the outer meat set so that way it stays in a round shape. So that way when you finish cooking them, it's not just like a flat pancake. And it does get a little hot, I will let you know. So if you have the barbecue style gloves, wear those. Make sure you have something to wipe your hands on also as you do this. And you could use tongs also. Just make sure that it's a soft touch because the meat is very soft at this point. It's easy to smush, and we want to, again, to try and keep it more in a log shape and less of flat on one side. This one's being problematic. Again, real cooking, real food, so things happen. Now you can really smell the Italian seasoning in there. The oregano is really good. I would go a little bit heavy on the basil myself, but I like basil. So we're just cooking these along. The idea right now is just to get the outside set. So then we can turn up the heat a little bit once we get the outer layer cooked and just let them go. And it shouldn't take too long, probably, I would say maybe 5 to 7 minutes total, because they're not very thick. If you're doing this on a charcoal grill or gas grill outside, I would give them a little bit further to go. Then on the indoor grill, it's going to take, because the heat is not as contained, and you're going to want to make sure that you again cook everything all the way through. Alright, so I'm going to turn this up a little bit higher. Let's turn that this way, sear that side. And again, this is really easy to do. This is not something that you want the kids necessarily to help with. This is more of an adult type dish to make, but they will have fun eating it when it's done. So I'm going to turn this up, and that way once they start getting a little bit more, I'm going to turn them at angles, so it's hopefully to get some grill marks on there. And here we go, and that way. Alright, so let me get these going for a few minutes. When we flip them over to get the marks going on the other side, you can see how easy this goes. Okay, so this has been about 10 minutes from start to this point, and they're cooking very nicely. I want to get them a little bit more caramelized on the outside, a little bit more char, if you will. Since we're inside and not on a barbecue, it's not going to be quite the same. But if you're in an apartment or somewhere where you just want to do this as a quick, easy, fun meal, then use an indoor grill or a pan. Again, this one's turning out really nicely, but you need to be patient. This grill is up as high as it's going to go, so it's going to take a little bit longer. If you want to try and keep some of the heat in, you can always use a dome like this and just put it over the skewers. That will help balance it out. That's one thing, is use a lid or a dome like this. If you want to trap heat in, it helps kind of roast the meat as opposed to just indirect or direct heat in this case. And they're about done, I think. That's one thing I needed to mention is, if you're not sure of the seasoning level, if you think you might want to add a little bit more, or you want to make sure that the meat is going to hold together, do a test meatball first. You don't even have to skewer it, just do a little one, cook it up real quick, let it cool enough to taste, and see if you need to add more salt, more pepper, maybe a few other herbs. If it falls apart, then I would suggest adding an egg and probably a 1/4 cup of breadcrumbs just to help it stick together. If you're using a leaner quality of meat, like was it 90-10 or 85-15, or even using say ground chicken or ground turkey, you're going to need that little bit of extra fat to help hold it together. And breadcrumbs are a really good way to stretch it a little bit further as well. So, as you can see, they're doing really nicely. Probably about another 2 to 3 minutes and I'll pull them off. We'll get set up and we'll start on the sausage and kale sliders. But don't these look good? Alright, so it's been about a total of 15 minutes from when we first started. It's about 10 minutes cook time. These are nice and juicy and browned, all of them cooked all the way through. We're going to move them onto a plate with a paper towel. That way the excess grease can drain off. As you can see, they've held the shape really well. They're not sliding around on the skewer. And again, with the skewer being soaked, it's not going to catch on fire if you're using a gas range or on the barbecue. So make sure that you soak them for at least an hour ahead of time. Alright, so basically 15 minutes and you have your skewered meatballs, or meatballs on a stick. And who doesn't like meatballs on a stick? So we're going to let these sit for a minute and cool down. We're going to get out everything we need to and get started on the sausage and kale sliders. And those actually should only take about maybe 10 minutes to cook as well. So again, quick meals, easy. This is one type or one batch of meat. You can split it and do 2 completely different things with. One you can take to the park and one you can eat at home. So let me get reset and we'll start on the sliders. Alright, so I've put the meatballs off to the side. We're going to get started on the sliders. So because it's been a challenging day, we all want something easy. We're going to start off with toasting our buns first. And this goes really quick. We're just going to get a little bit of color on them. Again, make sure you have enough oil. Again, real kitchen, real cooking. So we're just getting this a little bit brown. on the inside because it gives a little bit more of a texture. These sliders wind up being something like similar to a sloppy joe, and you should just take a minute to toast them up. We're going with a cast iron pot because, again, it is similar to a sloppy joe as opposed to a hamburger style. And we also ran into the challenge of apparently technology was winning today, so we're going with safety first and making sure that everything works. Alright, so I just gave these a light sear, just barely toasted. You want just a little bit of color, you don't want them too brown. Alright, that one's done. And they are very hot, so this is not something for children to do. If you're using a grill outside, make sure that you put the oil on the bread with a brush or a squirt bottle like that before you put them on the grill. Alright, so these are about done. A little bit more oil because sometimes it needs just a little bit extra help. Alright, so this bottom bun is about done. And again, they're very hot. Let that toast for just a second. And we'll put them off to the side here. And we'll get started by mixing in that other half of the meat from earlier. And you shouldn't need to put in any extra of oil for this point because the pork has enough fat for it. Let me set this off to the side. Alright, so this should brown pretty quickly. Turn the heat up a little bit. You want to break up the meat as it cooks. And it will cook quickly. If you're able to use a larger skillet to cook this in, it's better. Again, technology was not on my side today apparently, so we're going with what is available. And that's the whole point of cooking, is you work with what you have. So if all you have is ground beef available, then work with that. If you prefer even like a tofu burger or impossible meat, then go with that as well. And actually the meat substitutes have been pretty tasty, but it's making what you like. So I have the temperature turned up so that way it can grill. So it's browning, as you can see, and since it's about halfway done, we're going to throw in some diced peppers. Again, this is one of those, if you like them, add them in. You could also add in mushrooms, even more garlic, though there's quite a bit in this because I like garlic. Turn it down a little bit. We want it to brown. We also want the peppers to soften. When you roast or cook the colored peppers, they get sweeter. So red is sweeter than green. Yellow, I think, is a little bit less sweet than the red, and the orange, they just turn magical when you cook them. So, all right, so this is browning, and it's most of the way brown. It hasn't started crisping up, which we really don't want for this recipe. So it's mostly brown, just little bits of red. So now we're going to add in 28-ounce can of crushed peppers with the juices. And you're going to let that cook and reduce a little bit. Again, it's super simple. If you wanted to add in some more oregano or basil, take it more of an Italian flair. You could throw in some cilantro. That would change the flavor just a little bit as well. And in this case, I'm going to throw in a little bit of flat parsley right now. So give me just a moment. I have some back here. And just a good 3-finger pinch, to quote Fabio Viviani. He uses that measuring salt, but we'll use that for measuring the parsley at this point. And this is the Italian flat parsley, not the curly parsley. They're similar, but the flavor is just a little bit different, and they cook a little bit different as well. Alright, so this is thickening up just a little bit, which we want. And in just a moment we'll add in the kale. Now we have about 2 cups of kale and spinach. And again, this is another one of those. If you like collard greens or mustard greens for a little bit more of a spicy kick, you can use that as well. If you buy the bulk kale, cut the spines off because those are tough and take longer to cook. We want, again, quick, easy meals. Alright, so see, this is turning just a nice, lovely little hodgepodge of food. And you want it to cook down a little bit so it's thick. You don't want it too liquidy or too fluid. You want a little bit of a texture to it. And this is what, taken maybe 10 minutes at best so far. So once this cooks for just another couple minutes, we'll fold in the kale, let it simmer for just a moment, and then we'll be ready to eat. So as you can see, this is still a little bit on the liquid side. It's a little bit more than we want. So we're going to take about 2 tablespoons of breadcrumbs, mix them in, and keep stirring. Basically the breadcrumbs, putting that down so I don't drop it, the breadcrumbs will help thicken the sauce, but not so much that it's going to seize. Again, we want a sloppy joe consistency, not a stew, and this will thicken a little bit as it cools. So while this is still going, we're going to add in the kale and spinach. And this is one of those, like I've said, if you can change it up as you want. If you just like spinach, then just do spinach. I would recommend fresh instead of canned or frozen. If you do choose to use frozen, make sure you let it thaw completely and then wring out as much water as possible, or you're going to have basically hamburger soup. Not that that's a bad thing, but that's not what we're making today. Alright, so we're just letting it wilt a little bit. And the purpose of this is, again, upping the flavor, upping the texture, and just making it super easy. Now, any leftovers from this after the sliders can be put on top of pasta or rice. Make more sliders the next day. And it will freeze really easily, so that way you can portion it out if you're meal prepping to space it, through a couple weeks. That way you're making it easier on yourself. You're making one batch and spreading it out. Alright, so I think we're about done. I'm going to turn it off and let it cool for just a moment. And it smells delicious, but it's very, very hot. Alright, so we have 2 slices of Swiss cheese. You can use mozzarella. I would recommend or suggest a white cheese as opposed to like a cheddar, just for the flavor. But again, use what you have. Make sure you drain it fairly well. If you do this while it's still this hot, it's going to have too much liquid, so make sure you drain it, because you don't want soggy bread. And once this cools down, it will thicken up a little bit, so that way it's not going to be as much of a mess. So you don't want to get carried away. Again, these are sliders. This is not a hamburger. But cheese is cheese. So I'm going to do this. You get back over here. And what you can do with this is, again, make it fit. It's a slider. It's supposed to be fun, simple, quick. So we'll put just a little teeny tiny bit more. Cheese, steak, and bun. And then we'll do the other one. And again, if you have kids that don't like cheese, then leave the cheese off. It's all up to you. Alright. Again, real simple. It took maybe, 10, 12 minutes, and we have a meal. It's all pretty. The peppers in there are going to give it a nice little balance. And more cheese. And still more cheese. All the cheese. And there you go. We have our nice little easy sliders. Quick meal. Again, the leftovers can be put with rice. If you wanted to thicken up a little bit more, you could use it maybe even as a casserole filling, like for cornbread, for a stuffed cornbread. The possibilities are endless with it, but give it a try and let me know what you think.